I'm going to open this up for some questions and interaction. If anybody would like to ask some questions, seek clarifications of the three speakers, would you please come here? And so any thoughts, any comments, any reflections that you may have? Yeah, sure. And if you could introduce yourself, and then we'll get into introductions.
Hi, my name is Madan Mohan Rao, Research Director for Mobile Monday, a network of mobile startups. My question for UNICEF is, what are some of your previous findings on how the internet was used to do social and behavioral change? Are we seeing some comparisons now between mobile and internet?
Yeah. I don't really have a lot of data on how, I mean, we know how internet is going to be used, social media is going to be used, but how that changed behavior is not clear at all. I have my doubts, but I'm a bit biased. I also take, something that was said from the previous presenter. When he was talking, I actually recall what a professor of mine in high school in philosophy used to say. And he used to say, there is nothing more irrational than to think that humans are rational beings. Because if we were rational, then data would solve every problem we have. We know that smoking is bad for us. Once we know, we stop. We know that drinking a lot of Coke, as I do, is bad. And then I would stop and get slimmer. We don't. So going back to what we say, mobiles have a great potential, but also we know now that campaigns which are focusing on information dissemination, are not enough to make people change behavior. There is a lot of work in that. And again, internet has a lot of potential. Social media, mobile phone, for instance, have been fantastic in mobilizing people around the world to take action. I'm referring, for instance, to the Arab Springs, whereby with a few connections on Facebook or getting mobile phone around, people get in the streets very easily and start challenging certain regimes, which before was not possible. So I think we should start thinking about what are the potentials, what are the areas that we can use, like in the ICT world in general, but especially mobiles. But going away from the fact that thinking if we have information, the correct information to the right people, that will bring the desired change. I don't know if my colleagues want to add something.
I have three questions.
It's Arjun Venkatraman. I work with a group called the Mojo Lab Foundation. I'll just concentrate on what Mr. Myra said. I agree that data is not just the pure answer, but once you start beginning discussions about things that will eventually induce social and behavioral change, a lot of those subjects are going to be controversial. A lot of that content that comes out is going to be not pleasing to a lot of people. And the regulatory framework is, the way it is. So what's your take on that? And how do we deal with that situation?
None? Yeah.
Within the villages of India, there is a lot, in the area of health, there's a lot of misconceptions, superstitions, myths, and poor practices that people exercise at the moment. In order to shift behavior and to change behavior, there are two sides. One is to ask them to let those myths and so forth go. How do you see, the role of mobiles being able to not only shift them from giving up the myths, but then taking on good practices, for example? How do you see that and the importance of that?
International Wheat and Maize Research Center with headquarters in Mexico. I'm an economist and I'm working with the farmers in various rural areas, and it's not a question from my side but a comment that most of the information or data that we think we are delivering It's information that we have and we deliver. It's all supply driven. Maybe that information is not what they want. And therefore, many times when we do impact and adoption evaluations of these information, farmers do come up and say, this is not what we wanted. So many of us just give what we have, and we really do not want, or we haven't invested enough to see what is the demand for information. So I see as an economist, as a researcher, a mismatch between what's supplied and what's demanded. And therefore, a lot of behavioral changes that we expect in a particular time frame, that doesn't sometimes come because of this mismatch.
Is there a fourth one? Yeah, okay. We'll take the four together and then go for...
Yeah, so I was going through this agenda, and I think I have a fundamental... I'm Mrityunjay from Juxt Consult. I'm the co-founder of Juxt Consult. I don't see a single subject in this agenda which is around what behavior change or social change we want to drive. The agendas are around everything else, but that's a little more fundamental. Like even information, we may think, sitting 30,000 feet above the ground level and think that, a farmer really needs weather information. I really don't know. There are a lot of people who have tried doing that, but farmer may be looking at the sky or the soil and say that, okay, this is fine, I know what is the weather. So we first need to discuss a little more on what is that behavioral change and social change that we really want to drive. Then comes the means. Whether it is mobile phone, it's going to be something else, I really don't know. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to, all four of them are actually weaving into each other. You said, the young man here, that, data, but the words you were using, once you begin the discussion, then you mentioned the regulatory framework. And I like those two concepts introduced already. Once you begin a discussion, well, what is the nature of a discussion? And I'd like to come to that. Regulatory framework, right? What do you want to regulate? To his question again, what are the norms you want, the institutions you will trust to regulate, which is becoming a big problem actually with the mass of communication that is possible on the internet. Supply-driven data. What is it? I believe you should know because I want you to change your behavior, which is Coca-Cola, right? Yeah. But everyone makes choices about what they want the other to know. And it may not be mala fide at all. It could be very bona fide, right? That I believe it is good for everybody. Somehow convinced myself it's good for me. And now it's my evangelic duty to make everybody else change their behavior accordingly. But there's a danger then, what this other young person said, but what do we want the behavior change to be, which is the point I was making up. So I want to just give a framework here. I say there are 4 layers at which we interact in our minds and our emotions with information out there. The first is the very superficial on the top. Just data which is a bat in and bat out. Got a tweet, a bat a tweet back. I'm not even aware of what's going on inside myself when I'm choosing to respond to some and how I respond to them at all. It's just data. We come a little further, which is the norms of how things are done, the process that is used. It's like a courtesy of a conversation. Allow you to speak or not speak in our place, something. There's a process there. And if you change the process, you'll get different use of the data, different value out of the data. I go a little deeper. Now, these two things are things that when we talk of re-engineering, we're doing all the time. Process re-engineering or improving the access to data. And of course, the questions being raised by me earlier were, don't just concentrate on the access to data. Think about the process by which people can make use of the data. Now comes the deeper thing towards ends that they choose to have, in which I'm coming something which is what I call below the waterline. So these two things which are above the waterline, you can breathe, you can look at them. Now I'm talking of things which I think Paulo is also alluding to, which are inside ourselves. We have theories in use in ourselves about how things should be done. Either we believe it's a scientific theory or it's passed on by tradition. It's a theory in use. ऐसे ही करते हैं. और ऐसे ही करना चाहिए. We don't know quite often the theories in use that are influencing us to do what we do. And change comes about, deeper change, by examining our theories in use. Now, this is a pretty threatening thing, because if corporations have been successful, I'm just using an example, in creating large values, shareholder values, there's a concept of management and governance that they have been using. If I come as an NGO and say, that's a bad thing that you're doing, I mean, you're challenging their being. Well, what the heck, right? So on. So we have to have a conversation about theories in use. Now, this conversation probably doesn't need too much data, but it does require the willingness of each person to see the image in the mirror that the other is seeing and throwing back now, which is a distorted one. And you say you're a bad mirror, but it's the mirror. This is the other's perception of your theory in use, and I have one of yours. So rather than saying which is the better one, but what's the logic driving these different theories, and come to something even deeper, which is beliefs and values. Thou shalt not. We accept them without needing proof. We just value that way of so. And those conversations are even more difficult, but much more necessary if you're going to answer the question he said, what is the behavior at the end that you want of people? So I said I layer it into 4 and then look at to say different technologies and different processes, how can they help shifting at the bottom, not only providing data at the top. And so I was hoping also, like he said, which is why I laid it out, that while you can be talking about matters which are in the first 2 layers or maybe even into the third, you'll be conscious of how your values are being tacitly expressed in the beliefs that you're stating about good process, good technology, and so.
One comment on the lady who is economist. She was mentioning about the one-way supply chain of information, without really realizing that what is the demand of the information or the product or services. And I very much agree with you is that the two-way and interactivity that mobile brings or internet brings is an advantage, unlike TV channels. TV channels are absolutely one way. We decide which serial you to watch, and then you have to watch it. You have no choice. But in interactive medium, there is a possibility of choice of discard or accept or even reversely do it. And being an economist, I must say that lots of production of information, and when I say information, that doesn't mean only information as XYZ, but information as a piece of product or services, which has not been a trend of bottom up. It has been usually top down. Decision making, information, schemes, desires, or even their goodness decided by us or something like that. It's all top down. But now more and more pervasiveness of information technology or the two-way communication medium, the possibility is that it is becoming quite level playing in terms of both ways, the information flowing and therefore product flowing. And therefore, I always give this example, we don't have to only drink Coke, but we can let the world also drink Sharbat,
Yeah, I like a couple of things more. Going back to the question, to the question that was asked about how do we see the use of mobiles to achieve behavior change. I mean, I think that like Arun, I have questions, and I came here with more questions than answers. If I had all the answers, I don't think I would have convened this forum. But I hope in 2 days, maybe I'll have some more clear idea of what are the potential. And yes, usually when we do an initiative, we start from the specific behaviors and specific thing that we think we should change, done in a participatory manner. But in this context, I think it's enough to focus on the process, on what are the potential for change. And for instance, UNICEF, in collaboration with other partner, Dordashan, produced an entertainment education series for 4 seasons, which was called Kyunki Jina Sikanam Hey, something like that. And we had a very rigorous monitoring and evaluation system. And we know that, for instance, this video show per se does not bring significant behavior change. But we also know that it was very useful in raising awareness, in generating knowledge, and also in creating aspirations. And to me, aspiration are the seed of change. And aspiration means what? Means that a girl in a rural village that could only foresee herself becoming married, maybe 15, 16 years old, having children, doing nothing else, now she could aspire, and she had put down in our evaluation, she aspired to be a teacher and a nurse or something else that she couldn't see before. So every tool has a potential for change. We just have to see what would be the best use for this technology and mobiles. And it's not only about the context. Just these days I've been reading a fascinating book around some of the power of the social, of the peer pressure and change. And he was showing how the millions of dollars spent in the United States for a campaign anti-smoking that took a lot of time but start working with adults. Then the same campaign were done for adolescents. And it was a total failure. Do you have any idea why? They were the same campaign, bringing the same thing, talking to adolescents. But the appeals they were having, they were not at all resonating in adolescents. The fact that if you smoke, you're going to die, or that you get wrinkles, or that you might get sick. When you are an adolescent, if anybody remembers, you know that we think we are immortal. You don't see that die is not me, it's somebody else. It's so far away. And actually, the cases where they had the best result, guess what? Do you know how many times they actually mention stop smoking, smoking is bad for you? 0. Not once. And it was designed by whom? By adolescents themselves. And the message was what? Was not about smoking is bad. It was about big tobacco company are manipulating you to make you buy cigarettes. And when you are adolescent, you are a rebel by nature. You want to rebel against this. And that was the most powerful campaign. And it was done both with media and peer-to-peer discussion, but not once they went and say, you shouldn't smoke. Because when you say you shouldn't smoke, you're actually encouraging smoking to an adolescent. When you say smoking is bad for you, you are encouraging smoking. So all of these are factors that we need to consider. And we need to see how mobiles and other technology advance can be used and for what. Because mobiles by themselves are not the panacea and will not solve all the problem in bringing the change we want. But they can play a critical role. And that's what we hope we'll explore and find out in these 2 days.
We'll and or comment, and then we'll have a round of introductions before we break for tea, because we've not yet known each other.
I'm Sanjay and I come from UNICEF, Jharkhand. Is it clear now? Okay. I'm Sanjay from UNICEF, Jharkhand. This is a comment and also a question which I want to find answer by end of this workshop. Mobile uses for information dissemination, monitoring and tracking. Yes, there are examples and we have seen how best it can be used. But mobile for instigating social and behavioral change, for IPC and also for training, is something which I would like to understand and learn from experience here. And I also liked your analogy of when you said e-government and e-governance. So yes, service delivery, information dissemination, it's easy. But whether people are receiving it, how will they receive it, and how will they use it to change their behaviors and social norm is something which I would like to understand. Also, we accept the fact that behavioral change or individual or social change doesn't happen in vacuum. So there are layers of influences. And of course, there are confrontation. So you confront with a corporate which is pushing baby food. Many a times, I am talking out of my experiences, many a times on issues like child labor, you confront with a situation wherein many politicians themselves feel that it is okay for a poor child to work in somebody's house because he is so poor. So the approach we take in social and behavioral change is more on dialogic communication. So how mobile is helpful in all these things would be a good experience. Thank you.
Thanks for sneaking me in edgeways. I'm Ramakrishnan. I work with IdeoSync Media Combined, which is a communication for social change organization. And I just wanted to, after this discussion, raise two key points, which I see as central to this entire discussion of mobile phones for social and behavior change, which is that, one, with due respect, exciting times, mobile telephony has grown in this country at a tremendous pace. That's often leading a lot of people to feel that it's some kind of panacea in terms of how it should be used and how it could be implemented or how development could be implemented through mobile phones. But there's a danger in being swept away by the technology. It's something that happens at regular intervals as new technologies emerge on the scene. And the one technology to rule them all becomes the kind of drive that drives the adoption of a new technology or the focus of a new technology in terms of development and social change thinking. That's one part. The other part is, let's never lose sight of the fact that in the end it's about the content, it's about the people and the behaviors linked to the mobile phones and the technology, and that there's a tendency also to see any new technology with a perspective that shoehorns older methods of communication or older media into those new media. It is about understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the specific technology we are talking about and leveraging it entirely. So we should see this as one among a large palette of technologies to use, rather than as something that's the flavor of the season to move into. That's an error that could happen easily.
That's a very valid point, Ram. In fact, the entire way that we've structured this is to bring a reality check to the buzzword of mobile phones in the next session, which is really about the reach, access, and access to the girl who is 12 years old or 16-year-old whom we want to reach through. Yes, of course, please.
Your response so far, I thought was going to take us the wrong way. It's not about how the reality check about how far the mobile phones are reaching alone. That's exactly not the point. It's about other things that we have to understand as we are trying to measure how far physically the reach of any internet mobile phones is reaching. So that's what I had heard from the others, was certain deeper things here, and let's always keep them in mind and not just concentrate on 900 million, 400 million, is it a girl child who's using it, or so on and so forth. That is, of course, important, but the more deeper things, the more difficult things are, I think, the things that were mentioned. That's what I want. Thank you.
Introduction. So you can start with your comment and give an introduction, because we do need to break for tea and then get back by 11:30 for the next session.
Okay, so I'll start with that. My name is Sudhanshu Tripathi. I come from Midday Meal Authority. I'm finance controller there, and I also look after the project, the famous project for tracking the midday meal scheme on a real-time basis. I'd like to put another perspective. In fact, gone are the days when we were short of information. The way we have implemented this project, we are flooded with data. And so much data we have that the way we want to process it in form of information and analytics, we have been bombarding the analytics and different reports to different levels of district and commissioners, district magistrates and block level officers and district level officers. The idea is that a behavioral change is required as to how one can actually use the data that is available. Unless we change ourselves, only pushing the information, pushing the data and analytics and reports would not serve the purpose that is actually required. one does require the behavioral change, that one can goad oneself that yes, here's the information that you want or the people want, or the way it can be processed for different demands. Like the lady said, the demands can be analyzed and accordingly the information can be disseminated. So that is another perspective that I wanted to submit. Thank you.